Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something huge. It's this collision point, really, between Africa's accelerating debt crisis and some radical new solutions being pushed through AI and big shifts in global governance.
It's definitely more than just a finance story. This is a high-stakes development issue, and it's playing out on the world stage right now. The backdrop is, it's absolutely critical. We're talking about the 2025 Johannesburg G20 summit.
Which is South Africa's first time holding the presidency, right? An African G20 presidency.
Exactly. And their whole theme was solidarity, equality, sustainability. So with the African Union now a permanent member, the mission became really urgent. Find some common ground between these small incremental fixes that creditors love and the huge demands for a total overhaul coming from African leaders.
And technology is somehow at the center of bridging that gap.
That's the idea. Institutions like the Center for Artificial Intelligence and Sustainable Development, or CAISD, they're trying to use tech to forge that exact path.
Okay, so let's just establish how serious this is first. For you, listening to this, if you want to understand the real-world impact of global finance, we have to talk about the human cost. This isn't just numbers.
No, not at all. The numbers are, they're horrifying, honestly. By early 2025, a stunning 25 African countries were either at high risk of debt distress or already in it.
25? That's nearly half the continent.
It is. And to put that into context, the interest payments on external public debt for these low-income countries, they've basically doubled over the past decade.
Doubled. So this isn't just a borrowing problem. It feels like a failure of the entire international system that's supposed to prevent this kind of thing.
It absolutely points to that. And the starkest detail from our sources really shows you where the money is going. Just think about this. Governments across sub-Saharan Africa transferred somewhere between $45 and $50 billion in external debt service in 2025.
50 billion.
50 billion. Now, hold that number against what those same governments spent on things people actually need. Their combined public spending on health, about 27 billion. On education, 38 billion.
Wait, so the debt payments alone were more than what they spent on health and education combined?
That's it. It is, in effect, a massive annual wealth transfer out of the continent and into the hands of, foreign creditors and banks.
That is just staggering.
It is. And when you talk about the practical impact, it gets even more visceral. For every single dollar, a typical low-income African country paid in interest or principal, less than 60 cents actually made it to a classroom or a clinic.
So that outflow, it doesn't just slow things down, it actively creates these dependency dynamics, sort of like echoes of old colonial imbalances?
You've hit it exactly. It prioritizes external demands over local needs.
And what did that cost in real terms? What opportunities were lost?
Huge ones.
Yeah.
That $45 to $50 billion, that could have financed hiring an additional 800,000 teachers and nurses across the continent.
800,000.
Or, if you look at infrastructure, it could have connected 60 million people to clean electricity.
Yeah.
So this debt crisis, it isn't some abstract financial concept. It's a direct subtraction from people's lives.
So the problem is undeniable. But the solutions, that's where the global politics get really messy. We're seeing this major clash between the creditor nations and the African Union.
Yeah, this policy conflict is really the heart of the whole story. What's crucial to understand is just how deep the disagreement is on how to solve it. On one side, you've got the G20, mainly the creditors. They're all about what we call incremental reform.
And their main tool for that is the common framework, the CF.
Exactly. Their big declaration just reaffirmed commitment to it.
Yeah.
The CF was launched back in 2020 to replace the old debt suspension initiative.
But it's been so slow, hasn't it? I remember hearing that the average restructuring still takes about 2 years.
It's painfully slow. It struggled with, two main things. Getting all creditors, private and official, to agree to the same terms, and just the sheer lack of speed. Ethiopia did manage to get through it in about a year, which is better, but the system as a whole is sluggish.
So the G20's reforms are just trying to speed that up a bit?
Pretty much. They're procedural tweaks. Things like data sharing pilots, using more of these crisis-resilient debt clauses, maybe some small case-by-case debt for climate swaps. They're just patching the boat.
Okay, so they're patching the boat. But African leaders, with this Lomé Declaration in May 2025, they're basically saying the boat is sinking and we need a new one.
That's a perfect way to put it. They call the G20's efforts too little, too late, too complex. They're demanding what they call structural justice, a completely new set of rules.
And what does that look like?
It's laid out in 4 really radical demands. First, they want mandatory debt standstills. The moment you start negotiating, payments stop. No more waiting 2 years for breathing room.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the second?
Enforceable comparability of treatment. So making sure private creditors can't just hold out for a better deal than governments get. It has to be legally binding for everyone.
That would fix a huge hole in the common framework. But the next 2 points I hear are even more transformative.
They really are. The third demand is to exclude critical spending, so climate, health, and social spending, from the debt sustainability assessments, the DSAs.
Now, hang on, that sounds ambitious. How can a country that's already defaulting demand that creditors just ignore a big chunk of its spending? Isn't that financially unrealistic?
It's definitely a radical proposal. But the argument from African leaders is, look, if you force us to cut health and education, you destroy our long-term ability to grow and ever pay you back. You're just guaranteeing future defaults.
So it's a philosophical shift. Human development has to come before short-term fiscal targets.
Precisely. And the final demand reinforces that. They want an independent global enforcement mechanism, probably under a UN framework, to take debt restructuring away from the creditor-led IMF and World Bank.
So we have this massive gulf. One side refining old rules, the other demanding a whole new game. And the African Union isn't just waiting around.
No, that's the key. They're building their own institutions, the African Credit Rating Agency, ACRA, and the African Financial Stability Mechanism, AFSM. The goal is to get out from under northern-dominated institutions that, they argue, slap a biased risk premium on them and drive up their borrowing costs.
Okay, and this is where AI comes in. The South African G20 presidency and CIT are basically betting that technology can be the great equalizer here, that it can make both the G20 small fixes and the AU's radical demands actually work.
Exactly. AI isn't just being positioned as some efficiency tool. It's a mechanism for verifiable transparency, for actual structural reform. CAISD outlined 5 specific ways it can change the game, moving the debate from abstract policy to hard, actionable data.
All right, let's break those 5 down. Start with the most immediate one, debt transparency. How does AI actually audit a sovereign loan agreement?
This is all about what's called natural language processing, or NLP. You have to remember, these loan agreements are incredibly opaque, they're complex, they're written in different legal languages. Creditors often bury key terms like collateral clauses deep in the fine print.
So the NLP is kind of like an AI-powered legal auditor.
That's a great way to think of it. Imagine these tools, kind of like what the Bank for International Settlements has been building, that can automatically scan thousands of these dense contracts in seconds. It pulls out and standardizes all those hidden terms: interest rates, collateral, suspension clauses.
So negotiators can compare them instantly.
Instantly. It directly supports that Lomé demand for enforceable comparability. No more hiding things in the fine print. It's a huge power shift.
It really is. Okay, what's the second tool? The one that deals with financial leakage.
That's supervisory technology, or subtech. Think of it like an AI security guard for a country's treasury. Debt offices can use these platforms to constantly scan their portfolios.
What are they looking for?
Early distress signals, hidden liabilities that might suddenly blow up the debt, and, really critically, illicit financial flows, or IFFs.
And that's the money that gets illegally moved out of the economy. I remember the figure you mentioned, $88 billion a year across Africa.
It's an astronomical sum. And this is where AI can really shine. It can spot tiny suspicious patterns in millions of transactions that a human auditor would just never, ever catch. It's a real-time radar for corruption. And if you can stem that $88 billion leak, the debt situation instantly looks better.
Okay, let's go back to that really controversial Lomé demand, excluding health and climate spending from the debt analysis. How can AI possibly support that?
Well, traditional DSAs are often static. They're backward-looking. CAISD is proposing machine learning nowcasting models. These models use all sorts of alternative data satellite imagery to track crop health, mobile money data, real-time trade indicators.
So instead of just saying your debt is too high based on last year's economy, the model can say, if you invest X in climate-resilient farming now, your output will rise by Y, and your debt will be more sustainable in 3 years.
Exactly. It quantifies the return on development spending. It gives African nations hard, real-time evidence to back up their argument. These aren't just costs. They are investments that generate future capacity to pay.
And the fourth point, that ties into the new African institutions, right? Specifically, the credit rating agency, ACRA.
Yes, creating fairer credit ratings. The current agencies are often criticized for an inherent bias that inflates risk scores for African nations.
Which makes borrowing more expensive.
Way more expensive.
Yeah.
So the new ACRA can use AI to look at a much broader set of data. We're talking advanced climate risk modeling, mobile penetration stats, complex trade flows. It gets a more holistic picture.
A picture that goes beyond just the narrow financial metrics.
Precisely. The AI can generate risk scores that are less biased, more reflective of the real economy, and that could potentially lower borrowing costs for the entire continent.
And the fifth and final point is about making all this stick, about governance.
This is about governance and institutional design. The key here is building open-source, auditable AI tools, tools that align with the G20's own push for trustworthy AI. The whole point is to shift power through verifiable transparency, turning political demands into operational, testable realities.
It's an incredibly compelling roadmap, but let's zoom out a little. From just the debt issue to the whole G20 framework for AI, South Africa's presidency seemed to really use this moment to push for developing countries to shape the tech, not just consume it.
That was a major governance achievement, yeah. The G20 Task Force on AI and Data Governance affirmed that all nations have to have meaningful participation in shaping a fair, safe, and trustworthy global AI landscape. They weren't just talking about buying AI, they were talking about building and controlling it.
And what came out of that? What concrete steps were taken?
The creation of the AI for Africa initiative. It's a voluntary platform, a partnership between the G20 and the AU, and it focuses on the real building blocks: access to computing power, nurturing AI talent, and securing high-quality representative data sets.
And the datasets part is crucial, isn't it? If your AI is only trained on Western data, the solutions it comes up with are going to have biases baked right in.
Absolutely. The task force called Data Governance an imperative for equitable AI. They specifically stressed the need for high-quality data sets in indigenous and local languages to make sure AI actually respects diversity and delivers locally relevant solutions.
This has shown us two powerful but clashing paths. You've got the G20 pushing for continuity, just refining the old system, and the AU demanding a complete structural overhaul. But it seems the real common ground, the clearest path to impact, is using these AI-driven tools.
That synthesis is really the most powerful takeaway. AI offers these incredible tools, from using NLP on debt contracts to using subtech against illicit financial flows. But, and this is the core challenge that you, as the learner, have to keep thinking about, while AI offers this power, its adoption relies so heavily on global tech giants.
Because the whole AI supply chain, the cloud computing, the foundation models, the research, it's all concentrated in the hands of a few non-African companies.
Precisely. And therein lies the paradox. Can African nations truly use AI to overcome these old colonial-era dependency dynamics and achieve structural justice, if the very systems they have to rely on are proprietary, opaque, and run by foreign entities? That brings its own risks of bias and, well, a new form of digital dependency.
A fascinating and absolutely critical point. The potential is immense, but controlling the technology is the final frontier.
It is. The potential for African-led financial sovereignty is right there. But true sovereignty means governing the technology itself. That's the challenge that has to be solved for any of these solutions to truly succeed.
We encourage you to continue exploring those ongoing efforts by the AU to build its own financial architecture and the global debate around making AI governance truly equitable for everyone.